always keep a diary. Once there was a young woman in Korea who was blind in one eye. She decided that once she saved up enough, she would get a cornea transplant. Eventually she did, so she scheduled the surgery. She was very excited for it, however, afterwards things took a terrifying turn. She stopped texting and talking to her friends and even her family with no explanation. People thought she just needed some time to recover. However, eventually her parents grew worried about her and went to her house. They knocked on her door, but there was no reply. Then they called the police, who broke down the door. Inside the house, they found the young woman lying in a pool of her own blood. Her parents were devastated. No one could understand why she did this to herself. Perhaps it was just a social isolation. However, this theory was quickly changed when the police kept investigating. All the mirrors had been smashed in the house, as well as all other reflective surfaces. But it wasn't until they found the young woman's diary that they really found out what was happening. When they flipped open her diary, they found that on the last few pages she'd written over and over again, "My right eye is staring at me."
A habit I've had for almost 3 years now is that every day I write down a description of the outfits my friends are wearing. I do this because we go to school together and I see them every day. The exception of when I've done this is when school was virtual or over summers and breaks. I've had the same friends for a while, so the data I have on some of them is dating back to when I started doing this. At first, it was an experiment to see how often people repeat the outfits they wear. If I could find this out, then I know how often it's acceptable for me to repeat an outfit. Then it became a habit and I like doing it. It's cool to see how their styles have changed over the years, and sometimes I can predict what they'd wear based on this data. I also like the routine and going over my findings. My friends have never known that I've done this. I had a friend over yesterday and I went to the bathroom while she was left in my room. I keep all my data on Google Documents and create a new one each month so I can easily copy and paste for chart making. I had left my computer open and the document was pulled up on another tab. On the original tab, my friend and I were watching YouTube. My friend says that she accidentally closed the tab and that's how she found my document. She read through part of it and got really upset, telling me that it's weird. That's when she proceeded to leave and go tell our other friends. They only think that I've been doing this for a month. Am I wrong for tracking their outfits like this? Part 2 of how my friends found out I've been documenting their outfits for 3 years. I asked my friends if I could talk to them, and over the weekend when we were all free, we talked over FaceTime. I explained to them why I started keeping track of their outfits, how long I've done it for, and why I kept doing it. I told them that I was sorry for not telling them and I didn't realize it would make them upset. I told them I'd delete the information if they like and I'll stop doing it if they want me to. 2 of my close friends on the call said that they understood what I was doing better now. They said they didn't really mind that I was recording their outfits, but they would have liked to know first. I promised to run it by them if I do something I think might bother them in the future. They asked for me to show them my data, which I did, and they asked me to send them a copy because they said they honestly found it interesting. My other friend, the one who originally found the data, said that she was a little creeped out by it, but thanked me for explaining. She apologized for reacting so strongly without giving me a chance to explain, and I told her that it's fine and I don't blame her. We're all back to getting along now. My friends are great people. They're a little weird too, which is why we make such great friends. I love them and I'm glad they're so understanding.
Why you should never Google yourself. Some of us might have done it once or twice, but for Honora Petrova, one simple search led to horrifying consequences. Honora had always wanted to be an ice skater. She was young, talented, successful, and had a famous trainer. The night before her first big championship win, she felt more anxious than usual. For fun, she Googled herself and came across a Wikipedia page saying that she would win. When she did win, Honora thought this must be a coincidence. But every time after that, the page would predict whether she won or lost. She checked it every single time, almost addicted to refreshing that site. When she was about to compete in another huge competition, she decided to manipulate the website by changing the outcome it predicted. But instead, it said, Honora Petrova is going to get what she deserves. Right after, she was accused of sabotaging another girl's skates, which ended up slicing her in the forehead. Even though Honora denied it, she was banned from the competition and was dropped by her trainer. She thought this must be the worst of it until she checked the website the next day and saw a terrifying message about her. Follow for part 2 of the story. This is why you should never Google yourself. Honora Petrova became obsessed with constantly refreshing a website that predicted whether or not she would win her ice skating competitions. But things took an extreme turn when she decided to manipulate the website's predictions by editing it herself. This caused her to be banned from the competition and be dropped by her trainer. But things got so much worse when she refreshed the page again and saw a terrifying message about her. This time, it said she would be an orphan. She immediately called her parents, but she only heard maniacal laughter over the phone. After her parents died of a terrible accident, the police said that there were no records of her calls to her parents at all. She became reclusive after that and moved to another country, where she tried to reinvent herself. Eventually, she stopped checking the website and things went back to normal, until she wanted to audition for the ice circus. She checked the website again to see whether or not she would make it, but it only said one thing. It said, at midnight, Honora Petrova died friendless and alone. The next day, her body was found next to her computer.
You should never leave your house unlocked. Part 1. When I was about 12 years old, I lived in Kansas. Both my parents were out and I was home alone with my 2 dogs. I was sitting in my bedroom playing on my computer when I heard the very distinct sound of the front door open and close, like someone had just come in. My dogs got up and ran into the living room, and so I just assumed my parents were home. I shouted for my mum to confirm this and heard no response. I paused my game and walked out into the living room to see, and as I did, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I had heard someone come in, clear as day, but no one was there. I wasn't wearing headphones and I'd had the computer volume turned down, so I knew it couldn't have been the game. I tried calling my parents, but neither of them picked up, so for the first time in my life, I called the police. This is why you should never leave your house unlocked. Part 2. I explained the situation to the 911 operator, and she told me that police were on their way. I stood there rooted to the spot, and not long after my parents got home. The police arrived shortly after, and told us that thieves usually wait until homeowners leave, check the door, and if it's unlocked, they go in and take valuables. They checked the house, but found no one. They said whoever it was probably left when they heard that someone was home. They told us to make sure that we lock the doors, but not to worry too much. Not long after it happened, I told the story to one of my friends, and he said, "You only heard the door once. That means they were most likely already in the house. You just heard them leave."
The first story starts when I was 2. I don't remember it much, but my parents have told me this multiple times. We lived in this little white house. It was very old. My parents used to always hear me laughing and playing in my room with someone, but there was no one in my room. When they asked who I was talking to, I told them it was a little boy named Omar. They thought it was just an imaginary friend, but now that I think back on it, when I was 3 and 4, I did see someone. He was always very kind to me. I would play Barbies and he would play with me. He would draw me pictures. I would leave my books out for him so he could read while I was at preschool. I would tell him about my days and he would tell me about his. But things started to get really weird once my brother was born, and that is when my parents started to see him too. They believe that this is because he wanted to be the only little boy in the house. Stay tuned for part 2. Here is part 2 of the series of the little boy. When my brother was born, my parents used to sense and see the little boy as well. My mom used to feel his energy sitting in the rocking chair. My brother's mechanical toys used to just start making noise. He started to show up less and less in my room, and every time he would, he kind of scared me. He wasn't himself anymore. He was mad, angry, everything. My parents believe it's just because he wanted to be seen and he was lonely, and now that I had a little brother, I wasn't paying as much attention to the little boy. My mom would wake up to my brother crying in the middle of the night and go check on him, and she would sense something standing next to her. Weeks later, we moved out of that house due to a shooting in our backyard. My old nanny, who lived across the street, told us after we moved out, she would always see something in the window of my room.
On August 3, 2017, the bodies of a 69-year-old man and a 38-year-old man were found by a neighbor. The two of them seemed to have died while enjoying dinner together. When first investigating, police assumed they must have died of food poisoning. But when the toxicology report came back clear, that theory was thrown out the window. From there, it quickly turned into a homicide case, but who killed these two men and why? Police found no signs of forced entry and had no reason to believe that anyone would want them dead. After some time passed, doctors were finally able to determine what the cause of death was, and it wasn't at all what anyone was thinking. During their dinner together, the 69-year-old man bit off more than he could chew and began choking on a piece of steak. He could have easily been saved by the 38-year-old man, except for the fact that he was too busy dying from a heart attack that was triggered by seeing his lifelong friend slowly choking to death on a piece of steak.